All right, hello listeners, and welcome to PWGC's Environmental Echo. I am your host of this podcast, Paul Boyce, the CEO and president of PWGC Consulting. And today, as always, we're bringing you guys another outstanding and interesting guest that's right here from Long Island, with some the hot topics that we're going to cover are usually related to the environment and energy and those sort of things. And boy, have we brought a good topic and a good speaker today too. That would be Carrie Meek Gallagher. I just want to welcome her to the show. But before we get started, I just also want to mention best way to get a hold of us. If there's any listeners or viewers out there that want to reach us, that would be through our website. That's www.pwgrocer.com/podcast. If you guys have questions, thoughts, ideas you want to share with us, or potential topics or speakers, feel free to reach out. We got a great marketing department, and they'll get right back to you. So we appreciate that. So on with the show today. I want to welcome Carrie Meek Gallagher to the Environmental Echo. She is our guest, and she is currently the director of the Long Island office of the New York State Department of Public Service, which, if our listeners don't know, we're going to tell you what that means and what they do, and it's important, so pay attention. As I said, she's the director of that, which we can call DPS, but Department of Public Service, and they are charged with ensuring access to safe and reliable utility services for all New Yorkers. All right. These utilities include electric, steam, gas, telecommunications, and something that's near and dear to my heart, water, of course, all while protecting the environment. And that is no small task, especially here on Long Island. As we know, we got a lovely population here. Some pockets it's pretty dense. Some pockets it gets a little less than suburban in some areas, but it's all part of the game here. So, Carrie, you came from your current post after holding an impressive array of government positions, and I've met you over the years in some of these roles. And these have included serving as a acting deputy secretary to the governor for energy and environment, the Region 1 director of New York State's Department of Environmental Conservation, chief sustainability officer for the Suffolk County Water Authority, and commissioner of Suffolk County's Department of Environment and Energy, just to name a few. Quite impressive. We're glad to have you here today. So, Carrie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul. It's great to see you again, and I'm glad that you've been doing this podcast. I was able to catch a few episodes, and I'm very impressed with the topics that are being covered. So I feel honored to be one of your guests.
Well, we're honored to have you, for sure. So let's just get started and get right into what we want to hear from you about. Our company a little bit, PWGC. We do focus, one of our main focuses is on improving the environment through engineering. It's near and dear to our heart. What can you tell our viewers about the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act of 2019 and its implications for Long Island?
Sure, Paul. I think it's really important. So this is also known or referred to sometimes as the Climate Act. And essentially, the best way to think about it is how are we going to go from where we are today in terms of our energy mix in New York State to being completely fossil-free by 2050? So it's a pretty whole-scale change in where we are to where we're going to be. And if you think about it, it's end of 2023, so we're really only 27 years away from hitting that goal. So there are some targets in between, some interim steps. 2025, right around the corner, is one of those. And some of the goals there are fairly, I'd say fairly simple relative to large scale, but, having 6 gigawatts of solar.
Yeah.
Having 1,500 megawatts of storage, so that could be battery storage, but any type of energy storage, because obviously you can't have renewables without also having storage. And then in terms of energy efficiency and energy savings, getting to 185 trillion British thermal units, which is a lot. I know it's hard. It's hard for us to contemplate, but that's just how things are measured. But I think even bigger than by 2030, and I know we're going to get into some of this, but then you jump from 6 gigawatts of solar to having 10 gigawatts of solar installed in New York State, to getting 70% of our energy fully from renewables, to 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from the 1990 levels. And I know this is going to be near and dear to your heart with some of the work you guys do, but having 1 million electric homes plus 1 million electric ready homes. So the whole idea is, how do you get to fossil free? Is you electrify, right? Because that's how you can get off natural gas and oil. And then in between 2035, we get to 9 gigawatts of offshore wind, 100% light duty electric vehicles. So this is another big changeover, because if you look at buildings and transportation, the two areas that the most emissions.
I think of all of this, that's probably going to be the most difficult from the public standpoint, you know, and I've mentioned it on this podcast before. I've got a great big jacked up truck and I love it, you know, and yeah, I can see it being electric someday, but right now I'm like, I love the way it roars and rumbles down the road and everything else. And it handles great. And, you know, a lot of my friends are just like that too. There's no way I'll never go EV, you know, that sort of thing. How do you handle that perception? You know, and I'm all for it. I really am. But right now, I just bought this truck back in March. It's December now. Okay. So it's like, I'm holding on to this thing, I hope, for like 6, 7, 8 years, whatever it's going to be. Right.
Yeah. And 2035 is the changeover year in New York State. After that date, you won't be able to purchase a vehicle that isn't electric in New York State. At least that's, you know, that's the legislation, that's the target. And the governor has been a really admirable leader in this, in the face of everything going on in the world economy and the global situation, certainly. But I would say it's piecemeal. Although Long Island, and I think one of your other, I think this was just on one of your recent podcasts too, Chris Kelly had quoted it, right? Yep. So Long Island's actually been an early adopter of electric vehicles, just like we have been with solar. So I think it's twofold. One is you need to have the right mix of incentives for folks. And actually this year, coming out for 2024, PSCG Long Island will once again be offering charger rebates. So if you get an electric vehicle and you want to have a charger at your home, a residential electric vehicle charger, there's now a rebate higher for low to moderate income. But so that's one way, right? So let's have some incentives. Right now there are great incentives from the federal government, the state government, and then your local utilities. It's also then having the charging infrastructure available.
You're reading my mind. Yeah, that was my next question. What are we doing about that?
Yeah. So there's a huge investment in New York State and actually by the federal government. But New York State has really been leading the way. We have a program called EV Make Ready, so Electric Vehicle Make Ready. So tons of money going into making sure that there is, in fact, that charging infrastructure all across the state, especially on major roadways. And then I think the other piece we have to figure out is not just the major roadways, but how do you do it in major kind of like shopping centers or places where folks could plug in while they're doing errands.
Yeah, of course,
right?
Yeah.
Because you want to get to the point where charging your vehicle is as simple as stopping for gas. You don't want to. Yeah.
You hit it. Like the people I've spoken to, friends, family, they're all like, well, it's not just that. It's how fast it charges, how long it holds the charge, how far it can go. They can be temperature sensitive to heat and cold, to the life of the battery. And then what do you do with the batteries when it's done? Maybe the car only gets 100,000 miles on it, as opposed to my truck engine, which may get 200 plus if I'm lucky, sort of thing.
Yeah. And so right now, the infrastructure they've been focusing on has been a lot for like passenger vehicles, light duty. What we're also investing in New York State is plans and research and development essentially for medium duty and also for fleets, because that's going to be how you get people to believe that you can have your big trucks be electric. And yeah. So I have to say my kids, so we have 2 plug-in hybrid EVs. So we're in the, because I still have to drive them back and forth to college and stuff, we needed the range.
Yeah.
And the infrastructure is not always there. But they love, and my husband has become a convert too, they love driving the EVs because they're so much smoother. The pickup is great. All the features are great. So they've really just experiencing it. I think that's just another factor. If people have a good experience driving an EV or a friend's EV, they become a convert.
I mean, you mentioned the funny thing is the hybrid, the first time I drove one of those, it was a rental car. I think it was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm leaving the airport. I get in the car, turn it on. I don't hear anything, and I didn't realize they had given me a hybrid. So I do it like 3-4 times. I'm like, what am I doing wrong here? Is this car defective? And then I see it says hybrid. I said, okay. So I start to go, and the thing goes, and like you just said, it was amazing. It was the funniest thing. I was frustrated at first, but I agree with the smoothness of the ride, the acceleration, the deceleration. It's really, I don't want to say it's an upgrade over my truck, but it really was nice, and I think I could get used to it pretty quick.
Yeah, and they are getting better with larger vehicles. I haven't, I can't speak to the trucks per se yet, but I do know that a lot of the automakers with larger, SUVs, they're getting a lot better with the optionality for EVs as well. And
well, we're seeing it. The Ford Lightning is coming out, and Chevy and the Ram. Everybody's getting into the game, and that's still probably the top 3 selling vehicles in the United States, like the F-150, the Silverado, and the Ram 1500. So if we can get that market squared away and, make me a convert,
Yeah.
we'll be in good shape, I think.
Yes.
Or at least on our way to being in good shape.
Yes. And, this is going to take a while, right? It's not an overnight transition.
So back to Long Island, we mentioned that what you called the Climate Act. What are the real implications for, this pile of sand we all live on here in the middle of the Atlantic?
Yeah. So I'd say there's a couple of key implications. One, of course, why are we doing this? It's for resiliency, right? Big picture. So if you live on a place like Long Island, just this weekend, we experienced it again, right? We get battered by these storms, there's erosion. So obviously transitioning to fossil free is going to help us be more resilient. Part of that is like Long Island is actually doing really well in terms of transitioning to the clean energy future and meeting those targets. So like those 2025 targets, we've already exceeded our solar target for Long Island. We're at 137% of the target. We've already installed over 1,000 megawatts of solar on the island. So we're doing really well there. Heat pumps, which I know is near and dear to your heart.
That's been a recurring theme on the podcast here.
Yeah, but we're doing now, a lot of these are air source heat pumps instead of geothermal, just because, again, there's lots of logistical and operational factors that go into it. But 91% of the target's been met. So the goal was 30,000 installs by 2025, and we've already got over 27,000 heat pumps installed on Long Island. And that's, accounting for both parts. Energy efficiency, we're at 67% of our target being met. So that's how much we're saving. Electric vehicles it's a little tougher, although we have been an early adopter. They gave us, I think, a fairly large target based on vehicle registration. So we're supposed to have 178,000 EVs. We're at 45,000, which I still think is, pretty good to be at 45,000 already. I feel like 178,000 by 2025 might be a little tough.
A little ambitious, huh?
A little ambitious. Energy storage, we're a little short of. We're only 15% of the target. But again, energy storage, you really need big, and so that's not something that the average person can contribute to.
And this wasn't on my list of questions for you, but you brought up a great topic. I see it in the paper all the time. These battery facilities, storage facilities that it's too close to a school. It's too close to this. I don't want it here. They're not in my backyard. Do you see that really being an obstacle to overcoming some of these storage issues? With people and maybe not fully understanding them or being afraid of them or how the general public perceives these things.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the challenges. And it is like with every new technology, and this is something where, frankly, engineers can be helpful, right? Because we need to help alleviate those concerns. They are safe. But anyone who saw the cover of Newsday today, of course, the story was that there's all this energy storage being proposed and communities are upset, and Southold and Southampton have moratoriums, and how are we going to overcome that in order to reach these goals? Because again, you can't have 100% renewable energy powering your grid if you don't also have storage, because renewables work intermittently. So you need the storage for when they're not being generated. So I think there is going to be, and the governor's taking a leadership role on this again, but trying to get out in front in terms of what's the messaging and how do we work together and how do we engage the stakeholders and how do we help overcome those concerns. Certainly after the recent, I'll say recent, but in the past year, there were a couple of fires throughout the state, energy sources, and she pulled together a task force to look at that and try to figure out how we can ensure safety for these types of facilities.
Is everything still like that lithium ion type of battery for storage, or are we looking into alternatives that maybe, less prone to fires or easier to put out if a fire starts or anything like that?
Yes, they are. There is research into alternatives. And again, bringing it back to Long Island, we have 2 facilities here that I know of at least that are looking into battery storage or energy storage and clean energy. So you've got Brookhaven National Lab, which has a huge, they're all about energy, right? They're a Department of Energy facility. So they're definitely looking into all types of alternatives, but including in battery storage. And then you have the Advanced Energy Research and Technology Center at Stony Brook University, right?
Yeah, of course.
So between those 2, who then work with a whole bunch of, both of them work with a bunch of other institutions and private sector, and they're all looking into how do we come up with new ideas that are safer, that are better, that are more efficient, and commercialize them. So.
Well, at least we're looking into it. If we're not on our way, that's the first step, and it would certainly help because, like I've seen, a lot of opposition, and I just wish the public would understand maybe a little bit better, or maybe not be so fearful. But and there are things to overcome, as fires.
Right.
When a car battery goes on fire, it's not like putting out a gasoline engine fire. The fire department has to know what they're dealing with, and it takes a lot more water and things like that. So it's there is some understandable issues there that need to be overcome. All right, folks, thanks for listening. This is the Environmental Echo. I'm your host, Paul Boyce, CEO and president of PW Grocer. I want to thank you for listening. This is the first part of a two-part podcast series with Carrie Meek Gallagher, the director of the Department of Services here on Long Island, and we were covering topics of the environment and energy, and we'll be picking that up where we left off with her on the next episode.